This is Simba. She
everywhere?
travels everywhere with me. Come. Okay. Check, check, check. All right, all right, all right. If we can get a little bit of reduction in volume, I'd like to introduce the first keynote speaker. Hey, Sharon, we're just going to get the noise pollution down just a little bit more. Alicia, if you can let the Sonnet interested people know that we're going to just introduce Kash. So if we can just get everyone's attention, please. All right, that's good. Ladies and gentlemen, first and foremost, once again, thank you so much for doing this and joining us for the first ever Burlington Biohacking Expo. This is the first of its kind, and I'll ask Kash momentarily if he's seen this in Ontario at least, or maybe Canada before. Kash is our first keynote speaker. He is an author, educator, world speaker. He is the CEO and founder of the DNA Company. And he's had quite the amazing, transformative history and background. I was originally introduced to Kash just on Instagram because my feed is always filled with either educators or advertisements for coaches, which is just ongoing. I'm sure you can
constant,
constantly.
Yeah.
But when I first saw some of your posts, you were talking about gut health, and then you were talking about functional medicine, you were talking about functional genetics. And you were talking about some of the same concepts that I apply in my practice, fundamental basics that so many people benefit from, but you also deliver it in a highly educated manner, and I very much appreciate and respect that. And then I decided to just hit the follow button, and I continued to consume his free education and his 1-minute teachings. And then I saw that he wrote a book. And I said, I gotta look into that. And this is the book. It's called The DNA Way. Unlock the secrets of your genes to reverse disease, slow aging, and achieve optimal wellness. So once I saw that, that was right up my alley. And so I decided to go on Amazon and buy it and read it and very much enjoy it and learned many things. And then I got to learn more about Kash, which he'll explain his story. And so I had the gumption or the balls to reach out to you and say, hey, I read your book. That was first. But then I asked him if he would object to being a guest speaker here at the expo. And Kash has a high price tag. He literally speaks globally, all over. Most recently, you were a keynote speaker with Dave Asprey at his expo several months ago.
Yeah.
Right? So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very, very honored. Selfishly, because I get to learn from, I call him a living legend, but also all of us. And he's local. He lives right here, close by. So it's really cool that we've got these living legends all in our backyard and resources that we can learn from. And these celebrity personalities aren't just living in the States and abroad. They're here amongst us, just as many of us are here as well. So first of all, thanks so much for doing this.
Pleasure. Thank you for putting it together. That's just awesome.
And without you going into the depth of what we're going to talk about, I need you to autograph my book.
Let's do it. I would have shipped you if you asked me. I'll send you a refund for the royalty.
Oh, that's all good. There we go. So now it's official. Thank you for doing that.
Perfect.
So, first question, we're just going to have a quick little Q&A, and then Kash is going to take the stage solo afterwards. First things first, I want you to introduce your story and so forth. So first, what does biohacking mean to you?
Okay. So to me, it's there's all these tools. First of all, a lot of it is not new. A lot of it is what we've forgotten, right? So chemical medicine is fairly modern. We think of everything else as sort of alternative when it is actually what's original and authentic. And it's now coming back because we've been so failed by chemical medicine, right? So biohacking was the first step that was needed in bringing that back, which is we can maintain and hack our own biology, right? We don't need to wait to get sick to be told what to do to mask that sickness. We can maintain this thing that we walk around in, right? So biohacking is anything you can do for that maintenance, slowing your aging down, preventing disease as opposed to waiting for it, right? And what you see around here is a lot of what's being used, right? But it's gone far beyond that now. And a lot of it is bringing ancient wisdom back, right?
What are some of your favorite forms of biohacking?
Well, so almost everybody that I talk to, so just so you know, context-wise, we run a telemedicine clinic south of the border, right? So we see a lot of people that are kind of stuck. Been to every doctor, spent their life savings, don't know what to do. And there's usually a simple tweak needed in their biology to get them back to where they should have been, right? And almost everybody needs some form of detox in today's reality. Whether that's sauna, whether that's supplementation, we have to be unique to the individual. So for example, go take some glutathione based on your genetics, that could be good or bad, right? So there's certain things like sauna, like PEMF, that just work for everybody, right? So it's remove the tox, like get educated. That's probably one of the greatest biohacks, right? To actually learn and then start detoxing. And that's where typically you need to start. Like get rid of the acute problem before you start being optimal, you know?
Why is it that when individuals are faced with a health problem or crisis, more times than not, they don't seek out improvements. They continue to get worse. Why do you think that is?
So the belief today is I can do whatever I want, and when I break myself, it's a doctor's job to fix me, right? That's the belief. Not so much in the last couple of years since eyes have been open, but that has been the conventional belief. And that's, especially if you're in a country like Canada where your healthcare is paid for, there's a single path, right? When we talk to Canadians, I'm Canadian, I always have been, but our customers are American, the first question is, does OHIP cover this? If you're in Ontario, right? That should not be the filter. The filter should be, is this gonna get me the outcome I need? You know, and so we've been conditioned to believe that if it's not available in this sort of path, it's not the right answer. And often that's the wrong answer. Number 3 cause of death in the United States now is medical error, going to the doctor, right? It's the number 3 literal cause of death.
Is that through overprescription or
usually
ongoing use
drug-related
of prescription,
Yeah.
or is it through even literal doctor error?
It's referred to as medical error, but it's usually due to the prescriptive drugs.
Right.
Yeah, but that's referred to as error because they made a mistake. They didn't make. They did what they were supposed to do in their sort of training, but it kills people.
I want to revisit that statement when you said that patients or clients, the first question that comes out of the mouth is does OHIP cover it?
Yeah.
Why is that?
So there's a belief that healthcare is free, right? Healthcare system. This is in the book. Walter Cronkite. He said it's neither healthy nor caring nor system. That's our North American system, right? So what it is, it's sort of a way to capture an industry. So chemical medicine came along, and everything that was known until then was sort of demonized, right? And removed from academia, and academia was replaced with something new. And fast forward to us living here today, we don't know, what it felt like to be alive 100 years ago. It wasn't that long ago, but 100 years ago, this was very new. It didn't take long for things to change, but this is new. It's not working out so well. The United States has a $4 trillion healthcare budget. 90%, that's the actual number, 90% is spent on chronic disease management, meaning things you don't need to have, that you cause. Environment, nutrition, lifestyle, based on your genetic capacity to either deal or not deal with those choices, those habits. Mm-hmm. So if we understand that $4 trillion budget becomes 3.6 of it is wiped away. So there's forces that don't want that to happen, right? You have a $4 trillion food industry that's funneling customers into that. And that's just the beginning. Then there's EMF, and then we can go on and on and on and on. But it's become, the balloons become too big too fast, so it's hard to break.
How come, if a viewer were to go to your page, why have you chosen your delivery and the delivery of holistic and functional? That word is being thrown around so much.
Yeah.
But I've watched your content, you're using it correctly in contrast to some other individuals, right,
Yeah.
practitioners. So why do you feel as though that, and you can obviously expand on this, but why is the functional approach so much better than, let's just say, the Western or the reactive approach?
So a lot of people don't understand what functional medicine is. So what is that, first of all? The simplest understanding is medicine, allopathic medicine, is here's what your disease is called, and here's what pill you're supposed to take. Functional medicine is, why did you get sick? That's the simplest way to understand it, root cause, right? And if we figure this out, you don't need to know this. The symptom is your body, it's a check engine light. Go check something. But this thing is the check engine light. Turning the light off didn't fix anything. Some other light's going to turn on.
It's
right?
a symptom.
Yeah, it's a symptom. So, so in a nutshell, after having gone through, and I don't come from the industry. I'm not a clinician, scientist, doctor. I was sick. I fixed myself, started to fix others, built a business around it, and started to see how many people needed what they weren't getting, didn't even know what they needed to ask for, and that was a functional approach. And so I just started venting, right? And I started venting on Instagram with, like you said, little clips here and there of all of what I saw in clinic. Mm-hmm. This person didn't have to have breast cancer. This person didn't have to have autoimmunity for 6 or 7 or a dozen years, right? And the fix took weeks, literally weeks,
right.
When it was approached functionally. And that's why I speak about it so much, because it's not, again, what disease and what pill, but it's why did it happen? And when you go do that, it's not that difficult to change.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm going to leave now. I'm going to sit in the audience, and I want to do some more learning, because
Sure.
you've got an amazing transformative story, which I hope that the audience finds some commonalities, because we can all learn something, and just realize like what the potential is. And then I'd love to hear sort of where the space is right now with genetics, because it's very elusive still. We've heard the words, but we just don't quite understand.
Yeah.
And at the same time, what your company is doing and how you've really paved the road for a new way to test our genetics, because it's really quite exciting.
Sure.
Are you okay with me?
Yeah, let's do it.
Stranding you now by yourself?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Come on over, Simba.
So, from what was just said, what Brendan left off with, the easiest way to explain what he just said, why am I doing this, or how did I end up where I ended up? Let's talk about a fish named Sushi. Present you with a gift, right? A fish bowl. Now imagine Sushi, this fish that's swimming around. I've handed her to you in a bowl of toxic, polluted water. You can see it, green, murky, disgusting. You would instantly remove Sushi and put her in a new bowl, right? You know. And if you don't, next step is scales are a little off. There may be her bumping into the glass, like a little bit of depression, mood issues, cancer eventually, right? So we intuitively know that this is wrong. We know what the outcome is going to be. Meanwhile, what do we do to ourselves? Is we throw in a pill for the pain, we throw in a pill for chemo, we throw in a pill for the mood issue, and never ask what caused it, right? This is the simplest way I can sort of put a picture to it. And I know this because this was me. So, a few years ago I had eczema to the point where I couldn't open my left eye. It was like sealed shut. A psoriasis to the point where if I clasped my hands, my knuckles would bleed, so I would habitually keep them flat like this. Gut issues, couldn't eat. Depression, couldn't get out of bed. Migraines, that was probably the worst part. Could not function because they were so debilitating. The pain, vomiting was the only thing that would relieve the pain, right? And we know the gut and brain are connected, and we can get into that, but that's what would resolve it. So, me then, and by the way, this was, like I said, about 5 years ago. I was 38 and never had been sick prior to that. So I'd never ventured into their medical system to understand how it works. And now all of a sudden I had 5 different doctors and 5 different pills telling me I had 5 different problems. And my question was simply, why? What did I do wrong? What did I eat wrong? What did I breathe wrong? What did I sleep wrong? You know, what happened? What triggered this? It did not add up that all 5 things all at once. And the answer, if I were to sort of paraphrase, was we don't do that here, right? That's not our job. Our job is, here's what it's called, here's the pill. So that's where most functional medicine stories come from, self-healing. If you go read a best-selling author or a YouTube channel, they're usually screaming from the rooftops something that worked for them, that was so impactful that they had to share it, right? And that's the beginning of their sort of, I will influence you and teach you and help you and guide you journey. And so that's what happened to me, which I dove into my genome after several months of trying to discover functional medicine, acupuncture, naturopathy, all of what was slowly driving the needle and making me feel better. And I learned that my human instruction manual, so every one of these 50 trillion cells that you walk around in has a little instruction manual in it. And your cells, each one of those cells, is reading the relevant page to do its job. So the heart cell will read the heart section and know how to do its heart jobs, kidney cells, and so on and so on. I learned that we don't all have the same instruction manual. There's variability in how it's spelled, there's pages missing, there's paragraphs that are duplicated. And if I were to give you an example, there's a gene called GSTM1, which is a primary detoxifier of the gut. And you have right in front of you here the gut whisperer. This is why I start here. This gene drives the glutathione pathway around the gut. So glutathione is this master antioxidant that is looking like a police force in your bloodstream for nonsense to get rid of through the liver, clear and detoxify. You also have first line of defenses. You breathe, there's inhalation-based airborne toxins, and you eat. You consume things that come along with pesticides, chemicals, packaging, all sorts of things. Some of us, like myself, have what's called a copy number variation. It's not a variation of the gene, it's not a different version. I don't even have the gene. There's a page missing from my human instruction manual. So this job of first line defense of the gut, I don't do. So for a number of years, as I was with my business partner downtown Toronto, going to lunches, entertaining clients, taking in seed oils and fried foods and all these things that I wasn't aware were a problem, I was the one that fell apart and got sick and not him. He, coincidentally and sort of serendipitously for him, has an additional copy of this gene. So there was no trigger whatsoever for him. The exact same nutrition exposure was not a problem. So this is where the one size fits all sort of fails us, you know, and it will work. Like if you go do everything right, you'll probably do good, right? But there's that 1 or 2 things where we always get stuck, right? There's that one, I can't lose the last 5 pounds. I've done everything right, I still get headaches, what's going on? And this is where that instruction manual will tell you, here's the thing that's failing. So now fast forward, we start going into research, healing, and I start to learn that all these things that I thought were innate, you know, my mother who couldn't get out of bed, she was bedridden with arthritis, all of a sudden now goes to a gym with a personal trainer because I learned why she has arthritis and dealt with the root, and she doesn't have this thing that I thought was a disease that was part of her identity, right? A friend of mine, and if I start here, because this is I would say the #1 killer still today, cardiovascular disease. You know, we had a few million deaths from COVID, and in the same year we had almost 20 million cardiovascular deaths. So magnitude is much higher. We think of it as a heart disease. We in fact call it that, right? The heart is typically healthy until the last minute when it's not getting blood flow and it fails and you have a heart attack. The disease is usually in the arteries, so calcification, blockage, cholesterolemia. And so you start to reverse engineer how things actually happen, the biology. Then you start to look at what genes are instructing each step in this process. And I learned that there's a gene called 9p21 that determines how robust this artery is. So these tubes sticking out of your heart, the inner lining is called the endothelium, right? That's where the blood actually touches and flows through, which means that all of the toxins or free radicals that are in that blood also touch and flow through this material. Given the quality that you were born with, which is determined genetically, some of us, grandma smoking till she's 100 saying this is my secret to success, this is what led me to 100 years old. Some people breathing in the wrong thing, for example, in Canada, going golfing, not knowing that the regulatory rules around what chemicals are used to keep that golf course so beautiful are really lax because we have a long winter here. So the usage of certain chemicals that are illegal in other countries are openly used here. A good friend of mine who was the same age, when I started to heal myself, had a cholesterol problem at 39. This is now a year into the journey. And it made no sense. Pharmacist doing everything right, ate right, exercised right, was doing far better than me in terms of his habits, but had a cholesterol issue that continued getting worse. And he was on a statin, which is now the #1 prescribed pill. What's going on? We first determined that genetically he has the worst possible quality hardware, this endothelium, the worst 9p21. There's 6 locations we look for a gene variant. All 6 of his were broken, right? Didn't do a good job here. That being said, he could have been born on a beach in the Caribbean with no stress, beautiful food, nice sunshine. He would have never got sick. Bad hardware doesn't mean disease. It means propensity to disease, right? Risk is high. What was he doing? He was golfing 4 days a week in Canada, breathing in these pesticides with the worst version of what's called the GSTP1 gene, which is this first line defense of the lungs. I have no protection here. He had -70% protection here. So whatever he was breathing in 4 days a week, entering his bloodstream, free radical activity, causing inflammation to this inner lining that wasn't built the best, right? That was one thing. The 3 days that he wasn't golfing, he was playing tennis. And again, doing it thinking that this was going to help him get over his condition. The mitochondria, the energy source of the cell, is constantly, and every cell is doing the same thing, constantly combining nutrition with oxygen to create energy, right? These are your 2 fuel sources. And it's happening at the mitochondria. The efficiency by which we then get rid of the oxidation, so you use oxygen to make fuel, you burn any fuel, there's always smoke. There's a byproduct. Same thing with oxygen. You make an oxidant, which is a free radical, a toxin. So the irony is the thing that gives you life is slowly aging you and killing you. Every breath you take is 1 step closer to death because of the oxidation. The efficiency by which you do that is also determined genetically. SOD2, the superoxide dismutase pathway it's called, he had the worst version of that too. Now, playing tennis 3 days a week, getting into heavy oxidative activity, breathing in, out of breath, taking in far too much oxygen with the genetic propensity to not be able to deal with the oxidation, the outcome of that. So he had 2 reasons why: breathing in the toxins, creating the oxidants from taking in too much oxygen from playing tennis, to cause inflammation to this lining, right? So he was inflamed here. The body's response to endothelial inflammation is to deploy cholesterol as a hormone, like a Vaseline smooths things out. When the cholesterol meets the free radical that made the inflammation in the first place, it also oxidizes and hardens. And years later, a doctor will tell you you have cholesterolemia. The disease was the airborne or inhaled or swallowed or through the skin toxin that caused inflammation to this bad hardware, which probably started 15 years prior to the disease being tested through blood work, elevated cholesterol levels, right? The body is resilient and will fight. The body is designed to recover. It's when you continuously, chronically do the wrong thing over and over again that it cannot at some point tolerate that. And as you age, your mitochondria deplete in number, and so you're not as resilient. They also shrink in size, so you're not as resilient. And around 50, you get your first chronic disease. That's the North American average because of the combination of all of what I just said, right? And if you're American, by 65, you have 2, and you spend the last 15 years of your life in treatment. That's now the American dream, let's say, or average. So his story would have been dosage increasing, problems still getting worse, because he was still loading up the things that were causing it. Instead, his story became, let's support his glutathione pathway. So he was given N-acetylcysteine, he was given glycine, he took some molecular hydrogen. These would have been considered biohacks a few years ago. These are now conventional supplements that you hear about all the time. He was given something called Arterisol, which is a well-known studied supplement that actually rebuilds this endothelium. It very specifically does this. It builds up the endothelium. He was told to change his habits. Don't golf so much. Instead of tennis, go lift some weights. Right? Stay fit, but do it the way your body was designed and was expecting you to do it, because of whatever your ancestors did. Your genes are designed for that, right? For wherever he came from, whatever they did, that's what his body thought he was supposed to also do. So what happened? Disease is gone. This thing that was diagnosed and prescribed no longer exists. And it took not years, it took months. It took about 3 months. What would have been a life sentence, what would have been medication increasing, which, by the way, you see a direct correlation between the proliferation of statin usage and Alzheimer's and dementia. The line is identical because what are you doing? You're suppressing cholesterol and fat, which is what your brain's made out of. And then all of a sudden you get on an Alzheimer's pill, right? So now this guy's walking around healthy with no disease, and it took 3 months. There's other things that you've probably heard of genetically that are more commonly spoken of. For example, BRCA. Who's heard of the BRCA gene? The breast cancer gene, right? So a scary 4-letter word. There's celebrities that have spoken highly about the need to go check, right? Go check your BRCA. Doctors are fearful of BRCA and will tell you, go cut a piece of yourself off. There was an article on CNN about 2 months ago saying that you were doing such a great job because when we're finding BRCA, we're cutting 35-year-old women's fallopian tubes out to save them and protect them, right? And we're preventing cancer. That's what the article said. So what does BRCA do? BRCA doesn't cause cancer. And most doctors that will tell you to go cut your breasts off don't know that. They think they're protecting you. Breast cancer isn't cancer of the breast. Breast cancer just happened to get to the breast first, and I'll explain to you why. It's cancer. Cancer is cancer. Where it pops up first, we'll explain that. So BRCA is, and why am I saying this? Because Brendan asked, what's the difference between genetics and functional genomics, what we now know. Genetics was and still is academically, this gene equals an 80% chance of breast cancer. Go cut something off. This gene equals a 80% chance of Alzheimer's. Go have anxiety for the next 30 years, right? That's genetics. Functional genomics, just like medicine is take this pill. Functional genomics is let's understand biology and understand why this disease happens and look out into the future, this kind of GPS, and prevent it, right? So, BRCA, breast cancer. Park that for a second. What does BRCA actually do? It's a tumor suppressor. So God forbid you have any form of cancer, it's supposed to go fix it and get rid of it. It also fixes DNA damage, oxidation, cellular damage. It's a repair tool. So if you have a bad version of the repair tool, you don't repair. So you can't survive from cancer as well as somebody that has a good version. We still didn't figure out why you got cancer to begin with. So some women in their hormone cascade, which can be genetically determined, make a lot more estrogen. And this is step 1 of 3. They're estrogen dominant. There's genes that determine how efficiently you aromatize, which means convert testosterone into estrogen. CYP19A1. A lot of women do this a little too fast, a little too much, and so there's too much estrogen. Step 2 of 3, you have this estrogen pool now in your monthly cycle. Before you clear it out, you first metabolize it into one of 3 options: 2, 4, or 16 hydroxyestrogens, what they're called. 2 is the good, clean stuff you want. 4 and 16 are toxic. They cause inflammation. Step 3 of 3, your detox systems, the same glutathione system we talked about, your antioxidative system, the same one that dealt with the mitochondria, and COMT, which is a methylation gene, which we can talk about. These 3 things eliminate and get rid of this stuff. So then you would wonder, well, why does our body make this stuff? Why would it have even a toxin option to pick, right? The context today is this woman who may be estrogen dominant, who may also be estrogen toxic, who has maybe not the best detox system, also went on the birth control pill for 15 years. And in that top of funnel, added a lot more estrogen. Also didn't understand that between her cosmetics, shampoos, fragrances, is adding 500 chemicals a day on her body. If you add it up, by the end of the year, it's 4.5 pounds. The average North American woman has that many chemicals flowing through her bloodstream per year. Right? All hormone disrupting. Doesn't understand that her Lululemon yoga pants have forever chemicals in it, directly next to a cavity that is designed to absorb things, right? So all of this stuff added on top of this profile, which would have been protective, by the way, in an ancestral context. A little bit of inflammation is good. A little bit of inflammation triggers repair, or triggers rejuvenation. 0 inflammation is bad. Chronic inflammation is death. It's disease, it's poison, right? So you have this profile, estrogen dominant, estrogen toxic, don't detoxify so well. In today's reality, where everything is an estrogen mimic and a hormone disruptor, you've now fueled the fire beyond what you were designed for. Now, most breast cancer happens around the menopause age. Typically, not always, but usually. You no longer have a menstrual cycle. So your monthly ability to eliminate and get rid of this toxic flow is not there. And your body still knows it's there. It says, wait a second, I got to protect my organs, I got to protect the vasculature, which all could get inflamed and damaged. I'm going to go store this stuff in fat. And where do women have fat? Hips and breasts, right? All of a sudden you have these milk glands and ducts that as a cellular structure were never designed to deal and meet that level of toxicity. Your lungs, your gut, we know, like we said, they have first line defenses. They're meant to deal with toxins. This context of the breast tissue was never designed for that. So this overload, layered with the biochemistry, how we understand it, we store toxins and fat once we no longer have a menstrual cycle, equals cellular degradation, DNA damage, and eventually cancer. After all of that is when BRCA is supposed to get to work. But when you have a disease-centric healthcare model, you only study disease. You only just study once somebody's sick, right? What do we call this thing and how do we fix it? Because removing the symptom is a measure of success. Without ever asking, and go ask 10 oncologists, why does cancer happen? In Canada, more so than other nations, they usually don't know. Places like the US where people are paying for healthcare, there's more demand, so there's more knowledge. You'll find that today, in breast cancer hospitals in the US, one of the first things they'll tell you is no more cosmetics. Infertility clinics in the US will tell you no more perfumes and no more cosmetics, no more yoga pants, because they're finally getting to cause. They're finally getting to what disrupted the hormones to begin with, right? So knowing this is a perfect picture of what functional genomics is versus genetics. Genetics is BRCA and the story, go cut something off. Functional genomics is this doesn't have to happen, right? We can understand the biology, we can understand the threats. Now, how do you go through this process is step one, what are the red flags? The broken biology isn't the same for all of us. Maybe you don't have too much estrogen. Maybe you aren't making a toxic version. Maybe you can go on the birth control pill for 15 years and not have this level of outcome. I'm not telling you to go do that, but there's a variability in what you're going to experience from that choice, right? So all of a sudden, the choices become personalized, which is what we've been missing, right? It's been this one size fits all, which leads to trial and error. Hopefully this thing works. If it doesn't, I have to try the next thing, and then the next thing, and then the next thing, and eventually something works, but there was a lot of pain before that. And by the way, all these things that I was trying were to mask a symptom that I never needed to have in the first place. So I'll give you another example that happened right here in Toronto. There was a client we were working with, high-power female lawyer in the city, big fancy office. Picture your archetypical, Wall Street kind of scene, on Bay Street in this case. So she, while doing everything right, people that are stuck, I'm doing everything right, could not lose weight. And being the age she was, I think she was in her mid-30s, prior to that didn't have a weight problem, right? Could not get rid of this. And she did a decent job, but then got stuck. So what did we find? The neurochemicals of the brain are determined, how you experience what your neurochemicals make you feel are determined by the genes that instruct their creation, their binding, and their clearance. How much do I make? How much do I utilize? And how quickly do I get rid of it? Determines how you feel anxiety, how you seek reward, how addictive you are, how do you experience PTSD and trauma. All of these things are determined by neurochemicals, which we now can read the map. And if I had your DNA, I could tell you your personality to a T without ever speaking to you. I could tell you exactly how you behave, exactly how you respond, exactly where the friction comes from, what makes you happy, what doesn't. It's indisputable because DNA doesn't lie, right? So this particular person was a high-powered downtown Bay Street lawyer. And what made her so good at her job? Serotonin is this mood regulator. It allows you, clinically, we speak of it as a depression gene and an depression chemical, I should say, and anxiety chemical. If your serotonin is dysregulated, you're more likely to not be able to manage your mood given incoming stimulus. You're not going to respond appropriately for whatever happened. It's up and down, up and down, up and down. It's going to look like bipolar, someone looking in from outside. So the actual mechanism of that is serotonin allows your brain to prioritize incoming stimulus. Sound, smell. There's some people like, can you please stop chewing your food like that? It's gross. I can't think, right? There's some people like, on a Zoom call, somebody walked behind you. What was that? I can't pay attention for the next 20 minutes, right? So the ability to focus and prioritize or pay attention to everything. So it's not ADHD, it's hyperattention. Everything gets attention, right? Which was what made her such a good lawyer. Read a document, within seconds sees everything while still listening, while still reading your body language and knowing all of what all means, right? made her good at her job. In the context of dealing with other people, her team, etc., who maybe didn't see the world at this high level of detail, constant source of friction and anxiety. Nothing ever satisfied her. Because she was seeing the world at 120%. Every little detail and nuance, it all matters to her, right? Everybody else was seeing it at some at 100% and some at minus, they're like minus 20, so 80%. Now trying to work with those people, her thinking that her perception was real, that's how she really saw things. And these two other groups of people also believing their perception was real, right? And now trying to put that group together and come to some consensus on what something means. The body, in her case, is in constant chronic stress. And stress is one of the sort of least dealt with toxins. It truly acts as a toxin and causes inflammation, but unlike heavy metals and chemicals, we don't know how to detox it. So we don't address it. We just try and not have it. The only way to detox it is to meditate, the opposite. You wash the stress off of your cells by meditating and allowing your cells to heal, right? So her, in a job that had plenty of stimulus to cause the stress, plenty of people she had to work with that she didn't align with that caused the stress, this chronic stress state, the body knows is a problem. The body knows will hurt you and give you disease over time. So in order to mitigate that, drives you towards coping mechanisms. She worked out every day. She ate properly, clean. She actually did meditate, by the way. So she was doing everything right. In the office, she had no idea how many calories she was consuming as she walked by that pantry every day, coping with her stress by throwing a donut down, by throwing a cookie down, by opening a sugary drink, not even knowing she was doing it, and never, as we were working together, reporting those calories back. Right? Her list of my perfected diet never included that stuff. These were all coping mechanisms for her that she didn't even know she was doing. So the body, and food is the typical coping mechanism your body will go to first. There are many others that we know of, but food is the easiest, and it's usually the soul food, that big hit that gives you the wow factor. So this is the single and sole reason why she couldn't lose weight. It wasn't a calorie issue. It wasn't an exercise issue. It wasn't what she thought her diet was issue. It was an environment, a work, stress, and serotonin dysregulation issue. And without interviewing her and understanding her habits and literally going to her office to see what she was doing, because it seemed like she was lying, it didn't add up. And she was, not unknowingly, right? So the application of personalization is sort of global in everything you do. Every choice you have to make when it comes to what you eat, what you breathe, etc., is either a choice towards extending life or taking life away. If you look at the innate structure of the cell, of DNA, sorry, I should say, there's these caps on the end that are called telomeres. They protect the DNA. So as you put your body through abuse, oxidation, stress, toxins, whatever, these caps take the damage so that your DNA doesn't have to. If you look at them, they look like they're designed to last about 120 years, which tells us that's how long we're supposed to live. 120 years is the protection we've been given. Our DNA and our body and this thing we walk around is supposed to last that long. So the fact that the North American average is about 78, I think that's for women, for men it's a little less, 76 I think, tells us that our choices are removing years that we should have had. Right? The things that we're eating, that we're breathing, that we're exposing ourselves to are taking years away. There was a study done by Harvard that said, what are the top 5 things we can do to extend our life? And they took data from a whole bunch of health systems in the US, and the 5 things they came up with, and it's a joke, it makes me laugh when I hear it, but it tells you how sick we are. The 5 things they came up with that took the average American from 78 to 90 were exercise 3 times a week, don't smoke, don't drink, reduce your stress, and maintain a good weight level. That was it, to get to 90, right? Because what is the average North American doing? So in these 5 buckets, we're making mistakes. It's mostly nutrition, and it's a lot of what we're not aware of in terms of EMF and other toxins that are hitting us, right? So it's very easy to get to 90 if you just do these 5 things right. If you get into this, biohacking, hacking your own biology and fine-tuning that biology, so the steps are acute. and we kind of touched on this when Brendan was up here. Deal with the problem. Fix whatever the problem is. Get that out of the way. Whatever the headache is, the check engine light we talked about, fix that. Then there's this optimization. Start learning about what supplementation. Start learning about the diets. Perhaps improve your diet. Perhaps incorporate things you didn't before. Then you get the terrain ready for the biohacks, right? Load this onto an unhealthy body, you may actually get worse. There's certain things here that will help you, right? There's certain things here like, for example, this is amazing, Balancer Pro, lymphatic drainage, right? If there's no exit, where's it going? Let's get the terrain ready, right? But you should be doing this at some point, right? So anyways, going back to it, these 3 phases you go through: acute response, let me heal myself; optimization, let me start getting better habits that make me a healthy person. That's how I get to 90. Then I'm ready to get to 120. And not 120 in a hospital bed, 120 playing with my great-grandchildren, riding a bicycle, jumping out of an airplane. You should die because your parachute didn't open, right? That should be your story, not in a hospital bed. So that's what we're capable of, and we know this if we study human biology, right? So what I would leave you with is literally every choice you make in any given moment is a choice towards health or a choice away from it. Constantly, constantly, constantly. And in this study that I was mentioning from Harvard, and this was the thing I said I'll leave you with, the number one thing they found for centenarians, people that live over 100, and they studied 70,000 people, not 70,000 centenarians, but 70,000 people that have, longitudinal health, 80s, 90s healthy, and some of them were centenarians. The number one trait they found amongst those people was the quality of their relationships. Surprising. You would think it's some food or something else. Why? Biggest source of chronic stress, right? It's also the opposite. The high quality relationship is the biggest source of chronic love. Oxytocin, what you get from love, is that foundational hormone that makes everything else, right? So we are meant to be communal and connect and be with other people and talk and chat and do what we're doing here today. And Harvard is saying so, right? It's the number one thing they found, and that's not what they were intending to find because they wanted to build a pill that they could sell for a lot of money. What they found was it's the quality of relationships, not having stress, but also having quality time. The time that you use is of good value and high quality, and you're doing things that are of purpose, right? So that's what I would leave you with, is understand that it's not a lot to get from sick to healthy, and then you get from healthy to optimal in this biohacking type space. And just remember that it's not a one-time thing. It's every choice you make. It's constant and it will never end. You have to choose to maintain. But once you get there, and I know I said I'll leave you with this, but now I'm going to say I'll leave you with this. There's one more thing. There's a guy named Joe Polish who runs something called the Genius Network, which is a bunch of entrepreneurs who meet a couple times a year and brainstorm, mastermind, and all help each other. And I went to one of his masterminds, and he got on stage, and I will leave you with this. And he said, and why do I tell you this? Because once you get down the path of getting better and healthy, you feel so good you never want to go back. You don't realize how sick you were and how inflamed you were until you start to make a mistake on a daily basis, and then you feel it, that sugar meant something today as opposed to you're so sick you didn't notice. He said on stage, somebody asked him something about why he was in such good shape and he skipped lunch and he's fasting and all this kind of stuff. He said, there's no food that tastes as good as the way I feel. And then he walked off the stage, right? Mic drop. So understand that once you get there, it's hard to start. And I know a lot of you are beyond starting, right? But it's hard to start, go through the pain, fix it. Once you get to this, like I'm optimal, you never want to go back. It's the sense of reward you get is incredible. And you can take that to 120, right? Yeah.
Thank you, David. Now, would you object to hanging out for a little bit longer? And I figure in events like these, it's amazing hearing the speaker and all that stuff, but sometimes, or more times than not, there's not a lot of allowance for interaction and questions.
Sure,
so
yeah.
Would you like to hang out for maybe 10 more minutes?
Sure, yeah.
For some Q&As from the audience?
Yeah, let's do it.
Also, I really want to emphasize the importance on Kash's book. Go to Amazon, grab it. It really does give you some new insights and intel on what your potential is and what the future holds, but at the same time, it can be a little bit confusing, right? I was saying to you on the live, looking at the sequences of genes, like look at this. I'm on page 131 and I'm looking at the gene tested and the result. I'm just looking at MT. Oh, look at that. MTR, how appropriate. NTRR, SH. Like these are all just letters. And look, right? MTHFR.
Yeah.
If someone wants to dive into this and get their genetics tested, this is also largely why you're here. Please share with the audience, A, about the DNA company, and B, how readily available is it? Because almost prior to you, it was a heck of a lot more expensive and very difficult to find.
Yeah, so you mentioned Dave Asprey earlier, right? So he's an early stage investor in our company. And it was funny because we built the science, it was working, and I was like, who do I take this to? Hospitals, like where does this go, right? And so somebody, I forgot who it was, mentioned you got to get on Dave Asprey's podcast. I said, who's Dave Asprey? That was literally my answer, right? Because I was not aware of this space at all. So I found out where he was going to be at a conference, and I flew there, and I walked him with his tube. I said, spit in here, please. He's like, who the hell are you?
And this is, you did not know him.
Didn't know him. He didn't know me.
And you might as well have been a stranger from the crowd, which you
Yeah.
were.
And then I chased him for 45. He kept disappearing, hiding, and moving. And I was like, kept finding him. And eventually, he opened up Instagram, got on live. He said, I don't know who this clown is, but I'm going to spit in this tube, and we're going to find out what this is. And he did it, right? So why do I bring this up? Because you mentioned the cost coming down.
Yeah.
So when his results came in, we went through it with him. He was completely blown away and said that I went to Germany and spent $50,000 on a full genome sequence.
1-5 or 5-0?
5-0.
Okay.
And he said, I learned less in 3 days than I did in 1 hour with this. Right? Why? Because genetics, what I said is this gene means this gene means that. The body doesn't work like that. Right? So that's where we needed to start there because academia needed to know what does each gene do. You've got to start somewhere. But now to apply it functionally, the 22,000 genes, we only look at 100 of them. The rest is noise. I can tell in a mirror if my ear is connected to my head or not. I don't need a DNA test for that, right?
Right.
I need to know how my hormones work, how my detox systems work, my neurochemicals, metabolic health, the key systems that drive health. So anyways, just to your point that things are now, it's a few $100s what used to be 50,000.
This is through your company?
Correct, yeah.
And so, really quick, if someone were to just go to the website, thednacompany.com or .ca?
.com, yeah.
What do they do? How easy is it? And what can they expect?
So, so I built the DNA company around this summer. I made the decision to hire a CEO and walk away from it. And I am not involved in the day-to-day anymore intentionally because I think I built something and that was my job. And I hired someone who has 30 years of healthcare experience and I said, you now take this to the world, right? And so although, obviously I promote the company everywhere I go because I love it and it's my sort of legacy. What's happening?
I'm going to stop. It is a legacy. Can we just recognize this, please?
Oh, thanks.
You've got to give credit where it's due. So thank you for that.
Yeah. So for me now, it is what you said, advocacy, speaking, teaching. That's what I do now, right? While the new team, so the reason I bring that up, because I don't always know what's going on day to day. I don't know what the prices are, I don't know what the products look like, but I do know that the flagship test will always exist. And before I left, the last thing I left the company with was, we can't only test DNA. That's half of the personalization story. The other half is the gut. So I developed a gut microbiome
you're
test.
talking dirty to me now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like there's more gut DNA, you know this better than anyone, than there is your own human DNA in your body. So, and you can't truly personalize unless you know both stories. So I built the flagship DNA test, which still exists at thednacompany.com. The gut test, I built a early detection cancer screening test. So I sort of sequence a bunch of cancer DNA to look for cancer DNA in the blood far beyond any symptom ever comes to life. So the early detection. And so that's what I left the company with. But yeah, it's all at thednacompany.com.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got one more question. Not so much a question, but we touched on this on our Instagram Live, and you obviously, I love how in-depth you go about it in the book. Can you just quickly talk about the importance or the application and the potential for testing children in family and what that can lead to, and then we'll open up for some Q&A for the
So you
audience.
see that guy walking around in the camouflage jacket?
What's his name?
Yusuf.
Yusuf, do you want to come say hi really, really quick? Yeah, come on over.
So this guy,
Come sit on his lap.
here, sit here. So this guy has been tested, and he's been tested for a number of years, and where's his brother? There he is, sitting right there. So these guys, that guy wouldn't do his homework, and this guy wouldn't do his homework.
Wouldn't?
Wouldn't.
Okay.
Right? This guy would leave his messy socks everywhere, and this guy would be on the floor having tantrums. So what's going
You?
on?
Tantrums?
Yeah.
Did you get all mad sometimes? No, never.
No.
Okay,
Yeah.
sometimes.
So
Me too.
what did we learn? In this application to parenting was never, and when it comes biohacking, health, wellness, we always think in the adult context, right? Unless it's autism or some behavioral development issue. So I realized that it's the same genes that you're born with. It's just a different question to ask, different problem to solve. So this guy, not doing his homework, usual suspect, discipline, motivation, what are the problems, right? What actually was happening is there's a gene called TCF7L2, which determines the efficiency of your insulin response. Worst possible. There's a gene called AMY1, which determines the efficiency of your ability to convert starch into fuel. Worst possible. Homework time was after dinner. In a South Asian home where we ate rice every day. He was in a coma.
Is everyone listening and making the connection? What's the common connection? Well, blood sugar. Blood sugar.
Yeah. So now, that thing of like, I'm not doing it, I can't concentrate, I can't focus, all pointing here with typical parenting had nothing to do with you. It was metabolic. Just like you said, blood sugar, right? So the tweak of what is he actually supposed to eat and what time should his homework be made all the difference. That guy over there, there's a gene called COMT, which clears your neurochemicals, right? His father has the ultra-fast version, which makes me reward-seeking and highly entrepreneurial. It's never enough, right? I take big risks that I shouldn't take. He has the ultra-slow COMT. Came from his mom, right? What does that mean? That give him what he enjoys, and he binges, he gets stuck, right? Now, that requires structure. So for me, I can't help but pay attention to the very next thing.
Right.
And the squirrel effect, that looks, next shiny object, right? Constantly jumping around. For him, it's like nothing is shiny, except the thing that I truly value, and then I'm stuck in that. Can't get out of it, right? That's referred to, again, as discipline problems, ADHD, and which leads to then anxiety and frustration. And like, I don't have those things. Why are you saying that to me, right? Because the perception looking outward from his lens is very different, right? So something as simple as a microwave, you get an instruction manual, and these guys, you have to guess, right? So that the instruction manual is there, it's in the cells, and it tells you what are they going to develop into, athletics, should they be playing football, should they be running track and field, what are they wired for? If they do play football and they take a hit to the head, how efficiently do they deal with concussion and recover, BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor? I can tell you who should be playing contact sports and who shouldn't, right? How, for young women, what is their body going to develop into? And the high bar we now have because of social media and the pressure to be perfect, and what does perfect even mean? It keeps changing with trends, right? How close are you to that? Or do you instead understand what the best version of you is, right? Meaning that if you're more estrogen dominant, yes, you will be more curvy, and you will be, maybe there'll be more fat retention, more water retention. You're more androgen dominant, you're going to look more like a runway model, and you're going to be thin and wiry, right? If your goal is not aligned to that foundational body type, you're going to be stressed and frustrated as a child, right? So knowing all of that, it just takes all the guesswork out, makes things easier, but parenting, I would say, is probably the most important application.
So really quick, did it give you some new intel and insights on how to navigate with that information?
For sure. Like, so now, discipline, right? It's different for these two guys.
Right.
So there's a gene called ADRA2B, which determines to what degree do you bind and recall trauma. And I did some work with the US military, Black Ops, these special forces guys, on why was there so much PTSD and what was the driver and why some guys had zero PTSD. Who should actually pull the trigger and who shouldn't, right? And then some people didn't experience PTSD, they experienced more of a shell shock. So PTSD is, I can remember the feeling like it just happened. Shell shock is, I can't stop thinking about it, I'm stuck.
Right.
Right? Two very different things. Two very different genes that lead to both of those. Both of those things are superpowers if they're used in the right context and they're a crutch in that context.
Right.
So between these guys, one is wired for trauma, one isn't. One will remember and not do it again. One will do it 5 minutes later. You have to discipline them different.
See how powerful this could be for families, just parenting? The whole new spotlight on awareness, right? All right, let's have space for 2 questions from the audience. And I'll just go first come, first served. Does anyone? Lawrence.
So if I go to the DNA company, I can get a gene test and also the analysis of it and recommendations?
So part of, you can go if you want.
See you, Yusuf. Thank you.
So part of what I've sort of, let's say, the vision was build a product that I wished existed when I was sick, right? And the big question mark was there, how do you make it easy to use? So this whole question of, we believe that you get a test and someone's supposed to tell you what it means. Why not just get a test that I understand what it means? Right? That's what I wished existed, because if I talk to 5 different people, they're going to tell me 5 different things, especially with something as novel as genetics, right? So what I believed, and this is how it's built, is here's the 6 key things you need to know about. Mood and behavior, your brain. Metabolic health. How do you break down certain macro and micronutrients? Chronic sleep issues. Hormones. Innate cellular health, which is immunity, detoxification, etc. And then chronic disease, right? So those things are spelled out, laid out, not in the context of the genes, here's a gene report, by the problem. Metabolizing fats, metabolizing carbs, anxiety, depression, burnout. So you can read it, get it, and you probably don't even need to know what the genes are. Because really that's what it should be. Tell me what's wrong and how do I fix it? That's what I need to know, right? It should be that simple. So that being said, we do have a whole team of clinicians, from MDs to naturopaths to whatever you name it, based on what problems needing to be solved, that can go further if needed. From a single call to some people spend months, working on certain problems. So it's all available, but the intention is you shouldn't need it, right? Yeah.
Great question. Thank you. One more question. Go for it.
I am loving everything that's coming out of your mouth today. I'm just going to go and buy that book. So the one thing that really stuck with me is you said that there are ancestral DNA patterns that are working for us.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do we support that as an immigrant, as even like today's culture, where people are moving around throughout the world, because Canada has its own temperatures, and we have same thing, food, right? Like we were talking about food and how it supports us. How do we balance that?
So there's 2 halves to that. There's the one that you said, which is we're ethnically diverse, and there may be something unique about the jurisdiction we came from, right? So there's some truth there. Then there's our DNA hasn't changed in 250,000 years. So everyone in this room is wired like a cave person, right? There's been 0 evolution or change in approximately 250 to 300,000 years. Around 300,000 years ago, there was this random edit that happened. We still don't know why. There's a lot of theories about that. But we all of a sudden rapidly changed and became who we are, and nothing changed after that. Why do I say that? Because if you look at the past 250,000 years, modern agriculture is 10,000 years old, right? Modern civilization. The current industrialized reality is a couple hundred years old. 144,000 chemicals have been added to humanity since the 1970s. So the reality we live in is a tiny blip in that 250,000 years. This is why we're so sick, because for 249,000 years, all we did was pluck stuff out of the ground and kill things, right? That was life. And then you'd be with your family, eating, sleeping, right? It was all good, except for battling the next tribe or whatever, right? That was the problem. So if you think about it from that context, and you walk out this door and realize what you've been, yes, we have detox systems, yes, we have anti-inflammatory systems. For that context, right? So what you've been armored with, your defenses outside there is not enough. It's not enough, and this is why we're all so sick. So we're not going to be able to change what's outside, so you have to support, fortify, and this is what all this stuff is about, right? And the healthiest people are doing this stuff. So now going back to the ethnic thing, yes, there's truth to based on many generations of living in the same place, the strongest survive and pass on those genes. So the genes didn't change. The gene pool just becomes a little more you get what I'm saying, right? So now, if you take South Asian, we're both South Asian, right? I can predict that, like myself, you're going to have a bad vitamin D cascade. So 3 steps to vitamin D. There's a gene that takes the D2 from the sun, converts it to D3, makes it active. There's a gene that transports it to the cell. There's a gene that binds it and gets it intercellular where you actually need it. It's the only micronutrient that has that complex of a cascade. Everything else, vitamin C, zinc, A, one gene, put it in. That's it, right? Because our ancestors got far too much. They were outside all the time. Now we're indoors all the time, not getting enough, which is winter, mood issues, depression, which is scoliosis, which is crazy menopause, gut issues. Vitamin D is highly tied to gut, right? So yes, there's something to be said about ancestral habits and new habits and not being aligned. But that's going to be true for almost everybody because, again, today's reality nobody's wired for, right? Especially in the United States. It's probably the worst in terms of chemical food and all that stuff. So,
Yeah, thank you for that.
Great.
no problem.
Okay, my fellow biohackers, ladies and gentlemen, Cash, the DNA Way, thank you so much.
Thank you. Pleasure.
We're going to take a quick 5-minute pause, maybe a 10-minute pause, go to the washroom, stretch your legs, and we will come right back with Dr. Bob Rakowski, our next speaker.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm going to grab your mic. Okay, cool.